Hi there, welcome. It's Catholic Answers Live. Jerry Usher in for Cy Kellett today. Thursdays for many, many years have meant your questions and Catholic Answers live on the radio. So get on board with a faith question, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Obviously, the first one's on the line. You get to go first here. We got 2 hours coming your way. Senior apologist Jimmy Akin is here in hour number 1, and Mark Brumley, the president of Ignatius Press, will be answering the questions in hour number 2. So please do join us, 888-318-7884. The entire show team is standing by. And I believe Marie is screening your calls today, so she is fast, friendly, and efficient. She'll get you lined up right away. And as I said, Jimmy Akin is here for the first hour. Jimmy, welcome. Good to be with you again, second time this week.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Likewise.
Yeah, you know what? It's some great feasts today. You know, St. Valentine. You know,
you order
we
pizza or something?
What's that?
You order pizza for your feast or something?
I don't know. But, you know, I went to Mass, you know, and I don't ever really remember St. Valentine being, you know, his feast day that often. Usually it's Cyril and Methodius. Is there a reason why they would be prioritized that you know of?
Well, there's the church has a system of ranking holy days, and it varies from one region to another in part, but it also varies in part based on the choices of the celebrant, because there are a lot of memorials that are optional. And consequently, whether or not they get celebrated or which optional memorial gets celebrated on a particular day is up to the celebrant of the liturgy to decide. And so that could be a reason for it in this case, though to be sure I'd have to look at a document called the General Norms, or sometimes called the Universal Norms for the liturgical year and the calendar, which has a table of days and their respective ranks.
Okay. Well, folks, whatever you prefer to celebrate today, St. Valentine or St. Cyril and Methodius, and I'm sure if you check the online websites about saints, there's probably a whole lot of other saints who are maybe lesser known but are having a feast celebrated today. It's just great to be Catholic and to be able to honor and remember our older brothers and sisters in the faith.
Yeah. By the way, Jerry, since you mentioned that it's Valentine's Day, I thought I'd mention something that I'm going to do on Facebook after I get off the show today. You know, Valentine's Day is a day that's often connected with romance, and even if it's not connected with romance, people often exchange Valentines platonically. But there are some people in life who don't, you know, have anybody who's going to give them a Valentine this year, and that can be sometimes a little disappointing. So on Facebook, after I get off the show today, I'm going to put up a Valentine for everybody who hasn't already got one. And
very nice.
I want to share that with everybody who's listening in the same sense. So if you haven't yet gotten a Valentine today, consider you have received one from me over the radio.
Very nice. That's very nice of you, Jimmy. So, folks, be watching Jimmy's Facebook page for that sometime after the program today. In the meantime, we are going to take your questions at 888-318-7884. When I say we, I mean Jimmy. So we're going to start with David in Rochester, listening on the Station of the Cross. Hi, David. You're numero uno on our program today. Welcome.
Oh, hi, Jerry and Jimmy. It's a pleasure to talk to you tonight. I was reading Matthew 19, and I think I might get this a little bit wrong, but the Pharisees were asking Jesus to explain about whether divorce is allowed or not. And then Jesus says, you know, referring back to Genesis, he says, don't you understand from the beginning, you know, God created man and woman, therefore, you know, marriage should never be allowed to have divorce. But then I think it's in 19:9 where Jesus again says, no man should divorce except for unchastity. So when I did a little research on that, the study guide said that that unchastity meant incest. But when I look up that word, it really refers back to porneia, which is a Greek word, and I think it's for pornography. So confused as to how Jesus said it's never allowed, because that's from Genesis, it wasn't allowed, but then there was an exception. Okay. And it's causing quite a conundrum for me to really grip that.
So this is a familiar issue. There are a number of different understandings of this text. Now, one of the common ones, and you especially hear this in some circles with our separated brethren, they'll translate the word porneia in this passage as adultery. So it'll say something like, except for adultery. And that then gets taken as a permission to divorce someone if they've committed adultery, and then you would be free to marry somebody else, as if adultery somehow broke the marital union. But that's not consistent with what we have in the text itself, because what Jesus says in Matthew 19:9 is, "And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for porneia and marries another commits adultery." And so he indicates that if you divorce your wife, even if it was for porneia, understood as adultery, and you marry another, then that results in an ongoing adultery. And similarly, he says, he who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. And so he doesn't add any qualifiers about, oh, unless that woman was divorced in the case of an adulterous union, in which case her marriage is broken and it's okay to marry her. He indicates that it would be adultery regardless of the circumstances of the woman's previous marriage, and that's indicated by other passages in the New Testament, including in Mark and in Luke and in Romans, where Paul simply says you're bound to your spouse for as long as you live. This is assuming, of course, that there's a valid marriage in the first place. So if there's adultery, it breaks the marriage and you're free to remarry someone else interpretation doesn't fit with the data of the text itself. It is possible, though, to understand porneia here as a reference to adultery, because porneia, it doesn't mean pornography. Pornography is a related English word, so they have a common root, but they actually mean something different. And porneia is a broad word, and it does include things like adultery as well as other forms of unchastity. But even if you said, well, what Jesus means here is except for adultery, that wouldn't give you permission to remarry. Many of the church fathers looked at this passage and said, okay, if you divorce your wife and you marry, that's going to result in, and this is even clearer if you look at the parallel in Mark and in Luke, but if you divorce your wife for any reason other than adultery, you're causing her to become an adulteress. But you wouldn't be causing her to become an adulteress if she's already committed adultery, because in that case, she's already an adulteress, so you're not making her an adulteress by divorcing her. She already has achieved that on her own. The one difficulty with that interpretation is that porneia is not the ordinary Greek word for adultery. There is a specific word for adultery. It's moicheia, and as you can hear by the sound of the word, it's a different word. And so presumably Jesus does not mean simply adultery here. He means something that's a little more complex than that. The fact that this is found, that these exceptive clauses are found only in Matthew, the except for porneia clauses, they're found only in Matthew 19 and only in Matthew 5, and they're not found anywhere else in the New Testament. And some people have said, well, that may be related to the fact that Matthew's gospel is written for an audience of Jewish Christians, and consequently, it may have to do with an issue that would arise in Jewish circles, but not in Gentile circles. And that's what leads to the incest interpretation that you ran across. What some people have suggested is, well, there are certain kinds of marriage that are expressly forbidden in the Mosaic law. You're not allowed to marry certain of your relatives and so forth. And as a result of that, those marriages would be invalid, and so it would be perfectly fine and indeed mandatory in those cases to divorce such a person because the marriage itself is forbidden and invalid. So some people have said, well, maybe that's what Jesus has in mind here. Maybe it's these marriages that would be forbidden by the law of Moses. That would be an issue that would come up in Jewish circles, but it wouldn't really come up in Gentile circles. And so because it's kind of hard to summarize these forbidden marriages in a short space in English. We don't really have a word for these types of marriages, but since they involve relatives, some people will just use the word incest as a kind of catch-all term to refer to these marriages. And so there are arguments along those lines. There's also another reason, though, that Matthew, among all of the Gospels, might be inclined to include an acceptive clause here to acknowledge the fact that, at least in some circumstances, divorce is permissible. And that's because Matthew alone talks about the fact that Joseph initially planned to divorce Mary when he learned that she was pregnant by the Holy Spirit. And so he immediately, upon mentioning the fact that Joseph had planned to divorce Mary originally, stressed the fact that Joseph was a righteous man, and so he planned to put her away quietly, or to divorce her quietly, rather than subjecting her to public shame. But then, given the fact he needs to include Jesus' own teachings about divorce, it would raise the question in the reader's mind, well, how was Joseph a righteous man if Jesus says we're not supposed to divorce at all? And so that's led some people to propose that Matthew mentioned the acceptive clauses to indicate that there are some circumstances in which it would be permissible to divorce. And one of them that I haven't mentioned up to this point that some people have proposed, and that would apply to a situation like Joseph and Mary's, is when two people have been legally married, they become betrothed in Jewish society, but they haven't yet begun cohabiting. This is a custom that existed in the ancient Jewish world, where people would legally contract marriage and then wait for an extended period of time, maybe a year, before they began to cohabit. And then at the end of that time period, the husband would come, and they'd have a big ceremony known as the fetching of the bride ceremony, where the husband would come to the household of his legal wife and then take her back to his own household, and they would begin to live together as husband and wife. And so at that point, the marriage was not consummated, and thus the one flesh union between man and woman had not been achieved. And the Catholic Church even today would say, if you haven't consummated, it's not going to be completely indissoluble. There are situations where an unconsummated marriage can be dissolved. And so that, some have proposed, is what Matthew is thinking of here, because Joseph and Mary had been legally married, but they had not yet begun to cohabit. And so it was during that intermediate period that Joseph heard about Mary's pregnancy and could have assumed that she had been unfaithful, and therefore could have divorced her in this period on those grounds. And that would be consistent with the understanding of marriage and divorce that Jesus has. So there are a number of possibilities about what Matthew means here. Some of them are better than others. The church doesn't have a definitive teaching on which one of these options is correct, but it is a subject that's very interesting, and I have some discussion of it in my book, in a brief way, in my book, A Daily Defense. I also did a talk on all of these options a few years ago at our Catholic Answers conference on marriage, so you might check out the MP3s of that conference.
Okay, David, I hope that helps. We have got a bunch of folks to get to here on the program, so thanks for your call from Rochester, and thanks for listening to the Station of the Cross. Thursday, Q&A Open Forum. Jimmy Akin here this hour, Mark Brumley in hour number 2. And by the way, no surprise that the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers includes questions on divorce and remarriage, end-of-life issues, faith and science, angels and demons, salvation, the Eucharist, abortion, scripture and tradition, miracles, Mary, you name it. And, Lent is a great time for us to challenge ourselves. We really want to dig a little bit deeper in our faith lives, and Catholic Answers is making that so easy for you, and very, very economically attractive as well. It's the 20 Answers Challenge. Here's how it works. Hundreds have already signed up for this, and we invite you to do that prior to March 6th. That's when Lent begins. And when you purchase the sampler of all 32 books in the 20 Answers series, you're going to save 60% off the normal price. And Catholic Answers is challenging you to finish them all during Lent and Easter. Lent, again, begins on March 6th. And you're also going to get free shipping if you live in the continental United States. Jimmy, these are very digestible and, nothing at all wrong with maybe using something more of a faith nature rather than, say, devotional, or mixing this in with your devotionals during Lent.
Absolutely not. It's always good to learn more about the faith and thus more about God.
So, call today, 888-291-8000, or you can log on to the shop at Catholic.com. And don't be left out, okay? If your friends and family are joining the 20 Answers Challenge for Lent and Easter, we invite you to do that as well. Shop.Catholic.com or 888-291-8000. Okay, we're going to go next to Canada to talk to Ken when we come back, and Tom and Craig and Dominic and the others, so stay with us here on Catholic Answers Live.
Bringing you the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live is proudly supported by CatholicChemistry.com, a new dating site for Catholics who want to do dating right and believe relationships start with Catholic chemistry. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicChemistry.com for their generous support on the web at CatholicChemistry.com.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
He was a doctor of the Church and one of the most famous saints of all time.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Augustine is honored for his immense contributions to theology, but he balanced his genius with humility. Once declared, it was pride that changed angels into devils. It is humility that makes men as angels. He died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Q&A Open Forum program here. Jerry Usher in for Cy Kellett. Good to be working with Jimmy Akin again this hour, and we're going to help Ken next. He's in St. Albert, Canada, listening to the program on the Catholic Answers Live app. Hello, Ken. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi, Ken.
Can you
You're
hear
on
me?
the air. What's your question?
Yes. Question for you. I've got an 18-year-old son who likes to kind of quiz me, question me on different doctrines and teachings of the Catholic Church, and we had a discussion about the gender, and specifically about the gender reassignment surgery, and he's asking as to why that there's such a problem with it in the Catholic Church. And then we sort of we discussed that it's because of the mutilation of the body issue, and then he mentioned, well, how about tattooing, how about plastic surgeries, even for vanity reasons, and then so there is obviously different levels of this mutilation, and at some point there is a line in the sand where it becomes problematic, and I'm just wondering, how do I kind of go about explaining it to him?
So there's a difference between mutilation and surgery, and not everything that involves the physical alteration of the body constitutes mutilation. Mutilation occurs when one substantially interferes with the normal operations of the body. Merely making a cut does not do that. In fact, it's actually rather necessary that we perform some cutting. I mean, we all need to cut our fingernails from time to time, or they're going to get ingrown. Same thing with our toenails. And so our bodies are just designed in a way that requires some alteration of them. And the question is, are we interfering with or promoting the proper operation of our bodies by doing that? In the case of tattooing, there's nothing about tattooing, if it's done correctly, that interferes with the operation of your body. It's just coloring the skin, which is not dissimilar to putting on makeup. It's just of a more permanent nature. And so consequently, tattooing doesn't fall under the mutilation prohibition because it doesn't harm the ability of your body to function. Similarly, plastic surgery doesn't do that if it's done properly. What gender reassignment surgery does, though, is interfere with the proper operation of your body, because you're disabling, among other things, you're disabling the ability of your body's reproductive system to function. And so consequently, it would be like having another important organ removed. And so consequently, that's why gender reassignment surgery would count as a form of mutilation, whereas things like merely cosmetic surgery or tattooing would not.
What do you think, Ken? Is that helpful?
No, that sounds good.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks for the call. Thanks for listening there in St. Albert, Canada. Okay, next to Tom in Ohio, listening to Catholic Answers Live on Sirius XM 130. Hi, Tom. You're on with Jimmy Akin.
Thank you. My question concerns laicization in the Catholic Church of any of the clerics. After that process takes place, does the cleric still get paid by the church, and is housing still given to that cleric?
Typically, no. When someone is laicized or canonically returned to the lay state, they no longer minister on behalf of the church, and they typically are not, and consequently, they're not going to be paid for services they're not rendering. Having said that, there could be cases where an arrangement might be made where if someone is being laicized and they would be indigent, they'd be out on the street, then as a matter of compassion, the church might give them some kind of stipend or allowance, but it's not going to be payment. It would just be a humanitarian gesture to help the person be able to keep body and soul together in an environment where he's no longer functioning as a cleric. My understanding, though, is even that is rare if it occurs at all. I'm not aware of any cases where that's occurring, but I could imagine that in some cases a humanitarian provision might be made along those lines, but it wouldn't be payment because the person's no longer performing any services. It would just be a charity gesture to someone who would otherwise be indigent.
I see. Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
You're welcome, Tom. Glad we can help you with that. Next, we're going to Trabuco Canyon, California, and Craig listening on the EWTN app. Hello, Craig. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Hello, Craig.
I can.
Craig,
hello, can you hear me?
You're cutting in and out a little bit.
If you could talk right into the phone.
Okay, how's that?
That's better. What's your question?
Okay, my question is, hope I can frame this up right. So in the Bible, we read where Jesus did miracles and was resurrected and all the great things that he did. But do we ever read, and is there any literature out there from the Romans or from the Jews where they rebuke it? In other words, we hear about all these beautiful things that he did, and there's different religions and groups of people that say that it never happened. But is there anything historically that they ever wrote about it, rebuking it, if that makes sense?
Are you looking specifically for things that are said by non-Christian sources that criticize Christianity, or are you looking for just things that acknowledge Jesus' existence?
I think existence.
Okay.
In other words,
yeah, there are passages in various Jewish and Roman sources that mention Jesus. The Jewish historian Josephus mentions Jesus in a couple of places. In one of them, it's unfortunate, there has been some editing by a later Christian scribe that makes exactly what Josephus said about Jesus in that passage somewhat uncertain, but although scholars still have a pretty good idea of what he originally said. In the other passage, there's no doubt about what Josephus said. He's talking about Jesus's well-known quote-unquote brother, James the Just, and he mentions that James the Just was a quote-unquote brother of Jesus. So he mentions him a second time there. The Roman historians Tacitus and Suetonius both mention Jesus, at least in passing, sometimes with a little bit more detail in Tacitus. There are other sources, like there's a Syrian author named Mara bar Serapion that mentions that Jesus existed. And there are other reasons we have as well to conclude that Jesus existed based on what we know from these other early sources. Even if they don't mention Jesus himself, they will mention Christians. And we can show from first and very early second century sources that Christianity was all over the place by the beginning of the second century, but by Christians' own admission, it didn't exist before the AD 30s. And so that meant that Christianity had to grow from nothing around AD 30 to being all over the Roman world by 70 years later. And that means that it had to have an organized, very energetic evangelization campaign to spread itself that far. It had a strong missionary impulse. And the only way you have a movement that gets started and gets organized enough to spread itself in that way is if it had some kind of charismatic founder that gave it its missionary mandate. You don't just have people sitting around forming a social club deciding to spread themselves in that way, especially not in the ancient world when travel was so difficult. That's something I've written about, so if you Google Jimmy Akin, Did Jesus Exist?, you'll come up with information about all that.
All right, Craig, glad we can help you with that. Break time here on Catholic Answers Live. I am Jerry Usher in for Cy Kellett. Jimmy has got a long way to go this hour, and Mark Brumley will answer your questions in hour number 2. So we have a long way to go today on this Thursday Q&A Open Forum program. We're glad you're with us.
Catholic Answers Live.
Is the Church wrong on contraception? In a culture that worships the pursuit of sexual pleasure, the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception can seem archaic and unintelligible. Its critics say it's outdated, theologically unfounded, and even harmful. And even faithful Catholics can have difficulty explaining this moral teaching. Catholic Answers is out to change all of that. That's why we've just released Trent Horn's dynamic new DVD, The Case Against Contraception. Using scripture, papal and magisterial teachings, natural law, and new insights provided by social science and medicine, Trent puts forward a compelling case for Catholic teachings with his trademark charity and persuasive graciousness. Be prepared to give a defense. Order your copy of The Case Against Contraception today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Author Mark McNeil spent years in the Oneness Pentecostal movement, praying in its lively services, zealously spreading its unconventional teachings, and rejecting mainstream Christianity as misguided. Then he left it all behind. All in the Name is the story of a man who believed he was among an elite group of believers who followed the true faith when so many others had strayed. But an inquisitive mind, careful study, and the action of the Holy Spirit finally led Mark out of Oneness Pentecostalism and into the Catholic Church. This is an inspiring conversion story you won't want to miss. It's a faith strengthener for Catholics and an intriguing challenge to those who deny the doctrine of the Trinity. Order your copy of All in the Name today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Dr. David Anders. If you just don't understand something about the Catholic faith, Call to Communion is the show for you. Join us Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
I appreciate your patience, those of you on the line. And when a line opens up, the number is 888-318-7884 to ask your question of Jimmy Akin or Mark Brumley, depending on when you get on the show. We're going back to New York, and Dominic listening on the Station of the Cross to the program. Hi, Dominic. Welcome.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for taking my call. I recently graduated from PT school, and I just got my first job.
When you say PT school, what does that mean for us lay folks?
Therapy school.
Physical therapy, okay.
Physical therapy, yeah.
Yes, sir. And I just took my first job. During the application process, I was told that I would be exempt from joining the union that the full-time and part-time therapists are a part of. And I just went through orientation, and now I'm being told that I have no choice but to sign the paperwork to join this particular union. This is creating a moral dilemma for me, as they are backers of many political candidates who support now full-term abortion here in the state of New York. And I'm just at a bit of a crossroads as to what I should do
Okay.
so that you can give me.
Yeah. So Dominic, your phone connection is kind of fading in and out, but I got enough to be able, I think, to answer your question. It's unfortunate that they're requiring you to do this. I hope that there are other opportunities for you to, in the future, to be able to avoid this, other jobs you could take that don't have this requirement and so forth. Having said that, Catholic moral theology would not hold that you have to say no to this. It's in principle legitimate to join unions. That doesn't mean one always should do so or that it's always the best idea, but workers do have the right to unionize, and so consequently, joining a union is not something that is in itself immoral. Now, what if a union then does bad things? Well, at that point, you have to apply what are known as the principles of cooperation with evil, because in this world, all of us are sinners. And consequently, anytime you cooperate with another human being, you're cooperating with someone who at some point, at some time, will do evil. And that means that cooperation with people who do evil is unavoidable. And this is something that we really cannot escape as part of the Christian life. Even if we tried to isolate ourselves from other human beings and from interacting with other human beings, we wouldn't be, there may be a few people who have a special calling towards more intense forms of isolated life, but most people do not have that calling, and even the people who do have such a calling typically need human contact in one way or another, and that means cooperating with other sinful people. And so because cooperation with people who do things that are wrong is unavoidable, Catholic moral theologians have reflected on the conditions that allow that cooperation to be legitimate versus when it becomes illegitimate. One of the principles is you must not yourself approve of the evil that is being done. And since you're objecting to various things that the union is involved in, it's clear that condition is fulfilled in your case. Also, you must not yourself directly do something evil. And just by being a member of a union and paying dues to that union, that's not evil in and of itself. So you wouldn't be doing anything that is in and of itself evil. Another principle is that any involvement you have with an evil act needs to be remote, meaning you're not directly doing it. And so in this case, if you're not, even if some portion of your union dues is being taken by the union and being spent on something it shouldn't be spent on, well, that's not in principle different than buying a pizza and having the pizza delivery guy take part of his wages, which came from your money, and buying porn with it or something like that. Your involvement at that point is remote. You didn't make the decision for him to do that. You didn't approve of the decision. You didn't say, here, take this money and go do evil with it. You weren't directly involved. This was a choice that was out of your hands and that you had only remote connection with. And so consequently, it can be legitimate in such circumstances, assuming that there's, assuming the other conditions in the situation, like you need a job and this is the job that's available to you and you need to join the union in order to be able to get this job, it can be legitimate to go ahead and join, even knowing that the union, like any other group you're involved with, is going to do some things that it shouldn't at some point.
Does that help, Dominic? Give you a little peace of mind?
It does. I appreciate you guys taking the time and all that you do for us that listen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for being a physical therapist. I recently took advantage of some of those services near where I live, and it makes a nice little difference. So good luck to you in your career. All right, to New Jersey, Catholic Answers Live app. By the way, if you haven't downloaded the app, look for it in your app store. You ought to have it on your phone. That's how Tom is listening there in New Jersey. Hi, Tom. You're on with Jimmy Akin.
Hi, big fan, Jimmy. Thanks so much for taking the call.
Thank you.
My question has to do with two parts of the Mass. The first is, how is it decided whether or not the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed is said? Is it just up to the pastor? Is it arbitrary, or is there a way to figure that out?
It's up to the celebrant.
Question is, it is entirely. So if I go to a new parish or I'm visiting somewhere, there's no way for me to tell until we start saying it.
Well, I mean, it may be announced. I've been at parishes where it'll be announced in the bulletin that, say, during the season of Easter, we're going to say the Apostles' Creed or something like that. You can always ask if it's a source of concern for you.
Okay, all right, good to know. My second part, really quickly, after the communion, is there a specific time where you're supposed to go from the kneeling position to the sitting position? Because it seems like everybody does it at a different time, whether it be when the altar is cleared or when the Eucharist is put back in the tabernacle or when the priest sits. And
There's no specific point in time. Some people have proposed, oh, well, we ought to do it when the priest sits down or something like that, but that's just personal taste. The church does not have a regulation on this. It wants the faithful to be able to assume whatever posture best facilitates their own communion with God spiritually. And so if you're more comfortable sitting or standing or kneeling following communion, that's up to you.
All right, Tom?
Great. Hey, you have done so much for my faith. Thank you for all that you do. God bless you.
No
God
problem.
bless you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Yeah, well, for somebody like me, Jimmy, who's had both knees operated on, it's
Yeah.
usually when my knees get sore,
Mhm.
you know. Okay, Alan in Ohio watching. Hello, greetings, Alan. We're waving at you there. I am on YouTube Live. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, Alan.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
All right, so my question is, I'm 19 years old and I'm in college right now,
Mhm.
and my sociology teacher told us about a group of primitive humans called the Yanomamo people.
Oh, okay.
And she told us these horrific stories of immoral things that they do to each other.
Mhm.
And I was just wondering, since they haven't evolved that sort of morality or reason behind God existing, do they still have souls?
Yeah, so the Yanomamo are an interesting case. They're, for people who may not be familiar with them, they're a tribal people that lives in Latin America, and they have a reputation for being very fierce. In fact, they're sometimes called the fierce people. And if you read stories about the Yanomamo, yeah, they're quite fierce. They have stuff that's quite violent and, by our standards, quite cruel that goes on in their society. Having said that, they do have morality. Unfortunately, you know, they're sinners like the rest of us, and unfortunately, their culture is one that has not been substantially affected at this point by the Christian love ethic, and so it is one that is that has cruelty in it from our perspective. And they do, however, have a basic understanding of morality, and they very definitely do have souls. Every living creature has a soul because the soul is the life principle of the body that keeps a life form alive. In the case of humans, humans have rational souls because we have the gift of reason, and the gift of reason includes a basic understanding of morality, even if it's been distorted by sin or by our living in a particular culture. So the Yanomamo definitely have souls, and hopefully one day they will come to adopt an ethic of more universal love than they have thus far. But even now, they do have an understanding of morality that operates on a certain level. It's just not the fuller Christian understanding of universal love that we have.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome, Alan. Hey, we have an open phone line here. We need somebody on that line, 888-318-7884. Your questions, always fantastic questions, well thought out. And Jimmy Akin giving the answers for the remainder of this hour, and Mark Brumley will do likewise in hour number 2. And we'll get to Isabel and Maria and Anita and the others here in just a moment. I want to remind you, too, of something that, we mentioned the 20 Answers Challenge a little bit ago. And Catholic Answers also is offering you a great resource. You can use it now. now. You could add it to your Lenten regimen, whatever you want. Give it as a gift. It's, in fact, spread the word. It's free, folks, free, F-R-E-E, free. It's an e-book, and it'll help you develop your interior life more fully, more completely, more richly. And as we move towards Lent, it's a brand new e-book from Catholic Answers, and it's called Growing Closer to God. What is the interior life? It's got all kinds of great principles of spirituality and faith and prayer. And I think Michelle Arnold of Catholic Answers, one of their staff apologists, kind of outlines a little do-it-yourself retreat, tells you how you don't have to go too far from home, or you don't have to go anywhere from home, spend a lot of money, take a lot of time. You can do that if you want. We certainly encourage it. But anyway, this free ebook is available right now at the Catholic Answers Facebook page or at shop.catholic.com. And it's titled Growing Closer to God, What is the Interior Life? Now, you don't always get free resources that are going to help transform your life, make you holy, help you get to heaven. So take advantage of this as soon as you can at the Catholic Answers Facebook page or shop.catholic.com. Growing Closer to God, What is the Interior Life? You'll get that question answered and you'll be better off for it. I'm Jerry Usher in for Cy Kellett, and we'll continue right around the corner.
Join us on air today on Catholic Answers Live.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
Fallen away Catholic years and years ago, doing my own thing, and my mom and dad never gave up on me, and I know it was the Holy Rosary, and they kept after me. Philip, pray your rosary, and eventually I did. I'm a member of the Knights of the Immaculata, Maximilian Kolbe's group. I'm with the Legion of Mary, and I haven't stopped leading the rosary in nursing homes, thanks be to God.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Okay, we're going back to your calls in just a minute. I also have been asked to let you in on something that Catholic Answers is doing. It's a wonderful new project that you can get involved in. It's called The Very First Fathers, and it's all about the Church Fathers. Jimmy has a big role in this, as do some of the other Catholic Answers apologists.
No, just me.
Oh, just you?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I should have known. Sorry about that, Jimmy.
No biggie.
Jimmy talks all about the early church fathers and some of the writings that you may not have ever been aware of. So, tell you what, we'll tell you more about this maybe next hour. But go to Catholic.com and click on. There's a banner there called Very First Fathers, and you can be a part of this very, very exciting project of learning more about the church fathers yourself and helping others do the same. Okay, Isabel is in San Antonio listening to us on Guadalupe Radio Network. Hello, Isabel. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my call. I have a quick question. A friend of mine, I work at a Jewish community center, and so they were asking me about that Mary was not a virgin, because in Matthew, I believe chapter 1, it says something about Joseph not coming to know Mary until the birth of Jesus.
Right. So this is an old claim. It's one that there have been responses to for centuries. I know St. Jerome dealt with this objection back during the AD 300s. There was a gentleman in his day named Helvidius who was making this argument. The verse in question is Matthew 1:25, and Helvidius says, well, it says Joseph didn't know Mary until, and in Greek that's heos, until she gave birth to her son. And so that would imply for Helvidius that Joseph did know or have sexual relations with Mary after this point. And the word until, both in English and in Greek, can sometimes have that implication that after a particular point in time was reached, that there was a change of circumstance. So in this case, the proposal would be that up until this time, Joseph had not had sexual relations with Mary, but then there was a change of circumstance after this, and so he did have sexual relations with her. That's possible given just the grammar in this passage, but it is not necessary given the grammar in this passage, because the word until, again, both in English and in Greek, does not always indicate there's a change of state. Sometimes it's just a way of saying this did not happen up to this point, and it leaves the question of what happened after this point unaddressed. There are even situations where the context will tell you that the circumstance definitely did not change. A famous example of that is David's wife, Michal, in the Old Testament. If you read the Greek Old Testament, it says that because of the way Michal scorned David's worship of God, she had no children until, and it's the same word in Greek, heos, until the day she died. Well, it does not mean that she then had children after the day she died. It just means she never had children. And so we can see how this word doesn't mandate the change of circumstance interpretation. And that's one of the things that St. Jerome explored in his work Against Helvidius, where he responded to this idea, and he pointed out multiple examples where the Greek word heos did not indicate a change of circumstance after the point in time under discussion was reached. So the grammar here and the word in question doesn't indicate one way or another for sure whether or not they did go on to have sexual relations. Both would be possible just from this passage. But this passage is not the only thing we have. We also have other indications from the Gospel of Luke, from the Gospel of John, from early Christian writings, including ones from the 2nd century, that indicate that Mary did remain a virgin, and consequently, that sheds additional light on the way we ought to interpret Matthew 1:25. So the verse itself can be read more than one way, but then the data from other sources indicates it should be read in a way that's consistent with Mary's perpetual virginity, because that's what's indicated by our other material. And if you want to read more about that, go to Catholic.com and type in Mary and virginity, and a number of resources will come up for you.
Okay, Isabel? Okay, apparently
hope that
she's
helps.
Satisfied. Hope that helps you out. Thanks for calling the program, and we hope that we will hear from you again when you've got another faith question. Okay, Anita is listening to Catholic Answers Live on Iowa Catholic Radio in Des Moines. Hi, Anita. You're on with Jimmy Akin.
Hi, Jimmy. Thank you so much for taking my call.
No problem.
So I'm in a Bible study led by Edward Sri on the Gospel of John. And today in class we were talking about, or he was presenting, that God's presence left the temple when it was destroyed by Babylon. He was talking about Jesus' pronouncements during the Feast of Tabernacles and explaining some things. And what struck me and my fellow Bible gals was, if God's presence left the temple when the ark was lost and the temple was destroyed and did not return when the temple was rebuilt, why do we read in the New Testament that they still had a Holy of Holies and they still have the high priests giving special worship in the Holy of Holies if there is no specific presence there?
Well, they could have, so let me be devil's advocate for a moment. Just because they thought God's presence was there doesn't mean it was. So they could rebuild the temple and build a Holy of Holies in it and continue to have the high priests worship there at the appropriate time of year and just be mistaken, thinking that God's presence had returned. So you can't look at external behavior as an indication of, is God really present or not? That's something God has to reveal to us. In this case, though, God reveals to us that he did return. In fact, it was God who instructed them to rebuild the temple, and we have indications from the New Testament and even from other writings of the first century that God's presence was there, and that it left again when no later than when the temple was destroyed again. You have in the New Testament, for example, Jesus endorses worship in the temple. Caiaphas, the high priest, even though he plots the murder of Jesus, it's clear he's still a legitimate high priest of God from John's gospel, because John indicates that Caiaphas unwittingly prophesied about Jesus precisely because he was high priest at the time. So there's a New Testament recognition of the legitimacy of the temple and of the priesthood that implies God's presence there. Notice how Jesus clears the money changers out of the temple because it's meant to be devoted to the worship of God, including by Gentiles, and the money changers were taking up space that was meant to be allotted for Gentiles to worship God in, and thus they were crowding out Gentiles who could have worshipped there, and so they were profaning the temple, and that implies God's in the temple so that it can be profaned, because if it's just a secular spot where God is not present in a special way, that wouldn't apply. We then have in the Gospel of Mark an interesting passage. If you read Mark 15, when Jesus dies, he gives a loud cry, Mark says, and breathes his last. And the next thing Mark says is, and the curtain of the temple that separates the Holy of Holies was torn in two from top to bottom. Now, some people look at that passage and say, oh, so this is giving us access to God without having to go through the Jewish priesthood. And that's a possible interpretation, but the way Mark links it with Jesus' death, it looks more like this is God leaving the temple, because the fact that the curtain is torn from the top indicates it's God doing this. God is tearing this. And just as Jesus' spirit has just left his body as he breathed his last, it looks like, and Jesus has identified his body with the temple, as in John, where he says, destroy this temple and in 3 days I'll build it up. So Jesus has identified his body with the temple. Now that Jesus' body is dead, his spirit has left his body. We have the tearing of the temple veil, and that suggests the temple veil is torn not to let us in, but to let God's spirit out. And thus you could look at this passage in Mark as another case of God's presence leaving the temple. We also have indications outside the New Testament. If you read the Jewish historian Josephus, he reports that prior to the temple's destruction in AD 70, one night there was a big commotion of supernatural origin in the temple, and the witnesses heard voices saying, "We are departing from here." And the implication would be God is departing his temple in preparation for its destruction by the Romans, just as, according to Dr. Sri, God's presence departed the temple prior to its destruction by the Babylonians.
How's that, Anita?
Certainly some food for thought. What Dr. Sri said was that they were hoping that there was a hope voiced by Ezekiel in chapter 47 that God's presence would return again. Mm-hmm. And his point was that there was no presence till Jesus came to the temple.
Well, I haven't heard this course by Dr. Sri, so I can't really comment on that. But I would say, based on Jesus' treatment of the temple and the priesthood as holy, and as being desecrated by the activities of the money changers, as well as the way Mark presents this, I would say, in my opinion, it looks like God had resumed presence in the temple.
Okay, Anita, thank you for your call, and thanks for being in a Bible study. That's great to hear people in there wanting to learn more about God's written word. Jimmy, we are out of time for other calls, so but I'm sure you'll be back on the program again very, very soon. And
and Mark, I know Mark Brumley will do a great job next hour for everybody.
He will. Mark is always good on the program, and we thank you, Jimmy, for your time today, as always. And I want to invite Maria in Virginia, and Brian and Matt and Linda and Scott, all of you, if you can hold on through the top of the hour break. You know how it works. We have 2 hours of Q&A open forum here on Thursday. So if you've got the time, please stay there on the line. You will absolutely, definitely, guaranteed get on the program. I am Jerry Usher in for Cy Kellett today. And a reminder that you can catch me and Debbie Georgiani on many of these EWTN affiliates on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. That is at noon Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, and the show encores at midnight Eastern Time. So I hope that you can tune in and join us on that program. Don't forget, now is a great time, actually, if you want to get that free ebook from Catholic Answers. And it's called Growing Closer to God, What is the Interior Life? Make great reading and great spiritual growth enrichment any time of the year, especially with Lent coming up. So just go to the Catholic Answers Facebook page, or you can get it in the shop at Catholic.com. Growing Closer to God, What is the Interior Life? Okay, it's something that's important for all of us, and that free ebook is available to you right now. Mark Brumley coming up, so please stay with us here on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live. We're here for you.
Hi, this is Trent Horn. Did you know that you can have me and other Catholic Answers speakers headline your next conference or parish event? Go to CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com to get all the information you need to book one of our dynamic speakers today. That's CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com.
Do you enjoy tedious lectures full of facts you'll never use? We didn't think so. That's why we're launching the Council of Trent, Trent Horn's engaging new podcast. Every week, you'll get lively lessons in Catholic teaching, as well as a new conversation roadmap that will help you share your Catholic faith with anyone, anytime, anywhere. Visit TrentHornPodcast.com now to find out how you can subscribe to this exciting new podcast.
Did you know that Catholic Answers Live is on TV? What began as a monthly series on EWTN in April of 2017 is now going to be coming to you on a weekly basis. You can catch Catholic Answers Live TV Saturdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on EWTN, with an encore at 2:30 a.m. on Sundays. We'll also be available soon on Apple TV, Roku, and the Augustine Institute's multimedia platform, Form. Make a point of making Catholic Answers Live TV part of your weekly viewing, and we'll see you on the airwaves.
What difference does it make who or what you worship or what you believe? Sharing the faith used to make some people mad because it challenged their own strong beliefs. Today, it makes a lot of people yawn because they don't have strong beliefs about anything. Religious indifference is the great spiritual sickness of our age, a product of the relativism that dominates modern culture. This is Matt Nelson, and in my new book, Just Whatever, I'll take down the building blocks of religious indifference one by one. We'll look at the different kinds of indifference you tend to encounter in your friends and family members to see where they come from and why they're seductive. What you believe matters. Find out why and what to do about it in my new book, Just Whatever. You can order your copy of Just Whatever by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Sharing the gospel with family and friends can be challenging. It's especially hard when they won't even hear you out because of all the mental roadblocks they've built up. This is Carlo Broussard, and in my new book, Prepare the Way, my aim is to help you tackle that essential first step to apologetics and evangelization, getting people to listen with an open mind. Even our best witness can bounce right off folks like these if we don't prepare the way first, breaking down barriers and leaving minds and souls free to encounter the truth. I'll give you evidence and arguments and step-by-step strategies based on asking the right questions to help them overcome their obstacles and make a straight path for the Lord. Order your copy of Prepare the Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is a media ministry that serves Christ by explaining and defending the Catholic faith. We help Catholics grow in their faith, we bring former Catholics home, and we lead non-Catholics into the fullness of the truth. Our goal is to be the most trusted and accessible source for sharing, explaining, and defending the Catholic faith through as many media as possible, from personal contact to the most innovative means of mass communication. Have questions? We've got answers. Catholic Answers. Visit us today Catholic.com or call us with your questions at 619-387-7200.
So, you're listening to Catholic Radio. I think it's safe to say that you probably want to become like Jesus. Theosis is a fancy word used to explain the process of becoming like Christ. It's how God takes sinners like you and me and transforms us into who we were created to be. Basically, rockin' saints. Clumsy Theosis is a podcast where I take 2,000 years of Catholic goodness, draw from the great minds and spiritual masters of the Church, boil it down, distill it, and give practical advice to 21st century Christians. Basically, we'll learn how to do this Catholic thing like a boss. Subscribe to Clumsy Theosis wherever good podcasts are found.
This is Catholic Answers Live on your radio on this Thursday. Happy St. Valentine's Day. Do something nice for someone you love today, and it's also Saints Cyril and Methodius, and probably many other saints and blesseds and venerables and holy people as well. I'm Jerry Usher, in for Cy Kellett. I am the co-host of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Heard on many of these, hopefully most or all of these EWTN affiliates, Monday through Friday at noon Eastern and again at midnight Eastern Time. And our thanks again to Jimmy Akin, Senior Apologist at Catholic Answers, for his usual great job with the answers in hour number one. And this hour, more great answers are on the way from Mark Brumley. He is the president of Ignatius Press. Mark, good to be working with you again. It's been a long time.
Jerry, it has been. It's great to have you back and to be back.
Good. Well, we got a lot of calls here, so we're going to get right to those of you who are on the line in just a moment. And we do have, we may have an open phone line, 888-318-7884. Just fill that line, whatever question you would like to ask about the Catholic faith, non-Catholic Christian religions. We can talk about non-Catholic Christian faiths. We can talk about non-Christian religions. Anything you would like to ask, apologetics or faith-wise, 888-318-7884. Mark, you wanted to mention one of the books coming out, I guess, from Ignatius Press.
Well, it's a book that's out now. I want to mention it because I just love this book, and I'm so excited that we have it out. For those on the radio, listening on the radio, you can see I'm holding it up to the screen, but you can't see it very well. This is a book called From Fire by Water by a gentleman named Sohrab Ahmari, who is the op-ed editor, I believe, for the New York Post. And Sohrab is a remarkable fellow. He is from Iran. He was raised he had a sort of a nominal Islamic background, eventually became an atheist. But he immigrated to this country as a young man, and he wound up coming into the Catholic Church. And this is a wonderful accounting of his story, because it's not just in a lot of ways, when I read this manuscript, I thought, well, this is, even though he's in Iran, his family is suffering persecution and there are all kinds of things going on in that environment. There's a lot he has in common with young people in the United States. And then, of course, he and his mother immigrate, and they wind up in Utah, and he has the whole teenage experience and all of that in the United States. And to hear an outsider come to our country, someone who came from a different faith background, but who eventually became an atheist because of what he saw, how Islam was lived in Iran, and then he encounters everything in American culture and becomes an atheist Marxist. And from that comes to Christian faith and comes into the Catholic Church. It's just an amazing story. And he's also, a very up-and-coming young journalist. Has written for Wall Street Journal and Commentary Magazine and now the New York Post. So I just can't praise this enough. I usually, I come on here from time to time and push books. Okay, everybody understands that, but this is different. I mean, it's not that I don't believe in the other books that I talk about. I do. But this is such a moving story for me. It just made a real connection. When I read it, I had to mention it. And Sohrab's been doing a lot of the media talking about not just his book, but his whole story. And so I hope people out there get a chance to listen to him or see him. I think he's going to be on The World Over tonight on EWTN. So I encourage people to watch that and get a copy of the book.
Yeah, if you're curious, by the way, his name is spelled Sohrab, Sohrab, and the last name Ahmari, Sohrab Ahmari. And I'm kind of intrigued, Mark. I'm on his Wikipedia page here, and it says as a child he was interrogated by security officials about his parents and faced disciplinary action for accidentally bringing a video cassette of Star Wars to school.
That's right. There's a great story of that. The story is in this book, From Fire by Water.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's a great story. So
great. Okay, that's available at Ignatius.com for those of you who are interested. Make a great read. Okay, we're going to go to your calls, and Mark Brumley will give you the answers this hour on Catholic Answers Live, starting with Maria in Virginia. Hi, Maria. Welcome.
Hello?
You are on the air. Go right ahead.
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm calling to ask a question that I hope you're familiar with the answer, because I had heard it stated before on Catholic programming that there are 4 things that are caused by sin. But, it's kind of like a definition. So I'd like to hear it again. That sounds familiar to you.
Not quite sure what you're referring to. Of course, sin is anything we do or fail to do, anything we do that we shouldn't do, or anything we fail to do that we should do. So we talk about sins of commission, sins of omission, contrary to the law of God. So what God has set down for us, how we should live and how we should act, sin involves acting contrary to that. We talk about grave sin, or mortal sin, lighter sin or venial sin. The consequence of committing a mortal sin is that we lose sanctifying grace. When we lose God's grace in us that makes us holy, there can be eternal consequences of that loss of grace if we die in that state. But there are also this worldly or temporal, I don't say it's not the same as this worldly or temporal, limited consequences of sin, consequences that persist through time and can be overcome. So we call those temporal punishments due to sin. So I'm not sure if those are the things that you're talking about. Does that sound familiar, Maria?
Not specifically to what I'm trying to find out, that I think
Okay.
I heard on Patrick Madrid program for sure.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm not quite sure specifically what you're asking with respect to those consequences, but the significant consequence for sin is that it affects our relationship with God. So either it cuts it off when we're talking about mortal sin, or it weakens or damages it when we're talking about venial sin. And that's the most important thing, because if we die cut off from God, we go to hell. So that is the serious consequence for sin. Even if we don't commit a mortal sin and lose sanctifying grace, we still harm our relationship with God. And since the Christian life is really about our relationship with God and how that relationship is expressed in what we do in relation to Him and what we do in relation to other people. And so it should really be what our whole life is about. Our whole life should be about knowing God, loving God, serving God, so that we can be happy with Him forever. And so we want to avoid those things that are contrary to the purpose of our lives.
Okay, Maria?
Oh, okay. But you haven't heard of cosmic consequences?
Cosmic consequences.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, but of course sin, we can think of sin as having a consequence that's cosmic, that has to do with the whole universe. And in this sense, it is said by theologians that it's better that the whole cosmos not exist than that you or I commit not a mortal sin, but a venial sin. In other words, the value of being in right relationship with God outweighs the whole value of the material cosmos, material universe. So in that sense, if you want to talk about a cosmic consequence for sin, we can think of it in that way. I don't know if there's another sense in which this term was used, but that's what comes to mind to me.
Okay. Thank you, Maria, for your insightful question. We appreciate hearing from you. And we've got Linda and Scott and Bob and Greg and Simon all on deck here on Catholic Answers Live. Jerry Usher in for Cy Kellett today, and Mark Brumley is giving the expert answers for you. And we will return to your calls in just a minute, but just want to run something by you here. Wouldn't it be fascinating to learn what the very first Christians believed? They are called the Church Fathers, the very first fathers, and there's a good chance you've read up on some of them and studied them, and you certainly hear about them often here on Catholic Answers Live. And some of the early Christian writings are even older than some of the books of the New Testament. There's a wealth of information from the earliest Christian writers that provides vital information about our faith and complements what's in the Scriptures and really kind of ties everything together. And that's why Jimmy Akin and Catholic Answers have just launched a new campaign to teach people about the very first fathers. And you can learn about startling discoveries from the age of the Apostolic Fathers, including works that many people, perhaps you, have never heard of. For example, the book that may be the earliest piece of Christian literature outside the New Testament, perhaps older than the Gospels. There's an Apocalypse that appears older than the book of Revelation. There's a letter written by a first-century pope who reveals the fates of St. Peter and St. Paul. The writings of the martyr bishop who gave us the earliest reference to the Catholic Church and emphasized the real presence in the Eucharist. I could go on with examples, but the Apostolic Fathers are absolutely fascinating and so vitally important to knowing and understanding and living our Catholic faith. So don't miss your chance to find out more. If you would like to get involved with this project, go to Catholic.com, and there's a banner right there on the homepage, Very First Fathers. Just click on that, and full details will be right there on your computer screen. Again, that's at Catholic.com. Just click on the Very First Fathers banner. Okay, back to your phone calls in just 1 minute here on Catholic Answers Live.
Atheists claim they don't need God to be a good person, implying God's not relevant to morality. But is this true? Well, atheists can be good in the sense of knowing behaviors that respect the goods of human nature and living accordingly. St. Paul acknowledges this natural moral law in Romans chapter 2. But this doesn't mean God is irrelevant when it comes to morality. And here's the reason. Besides God's grace being necessary to live the moral law perfectly and merit heaven, God is necessary for the law to be morally binding. How can the moral law be binding if there's no moral lawgiver behind it that surpasses human authority? The answer is, it can't. So an atheist can follow the natural moral law, but only the theist is consistent in saying that such a law is morally obligatory. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their Catholic values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support. EWTN, teaching the truth.
I had called in last spring about talking to my parents, and I was going to convert to the church and how to talk to them. They were not happy at all, but I was confirmed to the church at the Easter Vigil service, and we really don't talk about the topic, but our relationship is still intact, so that's a good thing. Just wanted to say thank you, and I still listen every day because I always learn something new.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Catholic Answers Live Thursday Q&A open forum program. Linda is next, listening on WNOA Radio in Marquette, Michigan. Hi, Linda. Mark Brumley is here to help you out today. Thanks for calling.
Thanks for taking my call. I have a question. My mother and I were having a discussion the other day. My mom is 91, and her health is beginning to fail. And she was thinking about heaven, or after she dies, if she gets to heaven. She said, with all the millions and millions and millions of people that have lived and died, how is it when and if we go to heaven, will we be able to find our loved ones? And I had a hard time answering that. Can you That's pretty funny.
I thought you were going to. I thought you would say there was an app, a phone
There's
app.
an app.
Mark, but yeah.
There's a heaven app. A phone app in heaven. Look, I don't want to make light of the question because, it's occurred to me, billions of people, presumably, in heaven. And how do we encounter the ones that are loved ones and so on? I really think this isn't a problem for God. God keeps track of each and every one of us. And the communion that we will have in heaven will be of such a nature that I don't think we're going to have any difficulty finding our loved ones, or that our loved ones are going to have any challenge finding us. Heaven is underwritten by God, and it's not a problem for Him. Just as it's not a problem when we pray for our loved ones, for God to know to whom those prayers apply, talking about our loved ones who passed on, or when they pray for us, God has no problem linking their prayers to our situation in life. So I don't think there's going to be any difficulty at all for us to be in communion with our loved ones in the next life.
Okay.
All right, Linda?
I think your answer will give her some consolation because she has 3 children that she's lost already, plus my dad and her parents, of course. And I think that will console her. So thank you very much for your answer.
Yeah, and one thing I would add, Linda, is I don't think we should suppose that our loved ones are off, someplace distant, so preoccupied with the divine life of heaven that they have not been following us. I think they are through God by virtue of their union with God and the fact that God knows everything about us, where we are, when we are, and all of that, that our loved ones who are in His presence continue to pray for us and are aware of what's going on with us. So I don't think it's going to be a case where God's going to have to, send out the angels to try to find everybody so that they will know that we're where we are when we, Lord willing, when we enter into the glory of heaven.
Okay, Linda?
All right. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. Good to have you a part of the program today. Next stop is Salem, Oregon, where Scott is listening to Catholic Answers Live. Hello, Scott. You're on with Mark Brumley.
Hey, Mark, Jerry, it's a pleasure to be on with you. I enjoy listening to your show. As a non-biblical scholar, I listen to a lot of the questions, and I learn a lot from you guys. My question today is that my father died long ago, and his mother was Christian Science, and she wasn't real happy about my dad marrying her, and so she made my father promise not to become Catholic, and he never did. He would go to church with us on special occasions, but mostly what I'm kind of interested in is, I pray for his soul on occasion, and I'm just kind of wondering what's the status of his soul, or what opportunities does his soul have?
Well, of course, we don't know. The judgment is ultimately in the hands of God. God is going to know what his state of mind and state of heart was when he passed away. So I would continue to pray for him and understand that God's grace, God's purifying power can help people who die in his friendship. And people can seem not to be in the friendship of God, but either at the last moment turn to God, or it may be that we just have not seen grace working in their souls, even though grace has been there doing that. So we have to be very careful. That's one of the many reasons why we can't judge, pass a judgment on someone's eternal destiny, because we just don't know. But our prayers certainly can help people who are undergoing purification in purgatory to leave behind attachments to sin that may remain, even if they've been repentant for their sins in this life. So it's important for us, certainly not to despair of anyone's salvation, to keep them in mind and pray for them, and have a trusting attitude with respect to God's merciful love. If we love somebody, we can be confident that God loves that person even more than we do.
Okay.
Well, that's nice, and I like to think that he's got opportunity there because he was a good man and he was a believer, but he could not make that jump to the Catholic faith, and so that's kind of where I was at. Thank you for your time.
Sure, absolutely, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for calling, Scott. Glad we could help you with that. Catholic Answers Live on this Thursday. Your questions reign supreme, and Mark Brumley is answering them. And we go to Bob next, who is in Birmingham Hills, Michigan, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Hello, Bob. Welcome.
Hi. Can you hear me all right?
Very well.
Okay. My question is, there's a phrase that's constantly referred to as Jesus Christ has conquered death. I'd like to know exactly how I'm to interpret that phrase and understand what was death prior to Jesus Christ coming. Can you help me out?
Well, I think what the phrase Jesus Christ has conquered death means primarily is that Jesus rose from the dead, that he died, like everybody dies, but by the power of his Father, in his own power, he was raised from the dead. So death could not hold him in that sense. Obviously, death is a condition, it's not a person. So when we talk about death, or conquering death, it may sound as if we're personifying death. Well, that's just a figure of speech. Nevertheless, as we all know too well, death is a reality. It is a real thing. It is a real state. And Jesus, unlike everybody else who came before him, Jesus not only died, but he was raised from the dead and entered into a state, a transformed state, a glorified state of life where he can't die anymore. So he's conquered death in coming back to life from the dead. He's conquered death in coming back to a way of life, a manner of life that is no longer subject to the ravages of death. Now, he's done that for us, so that means that not only is he the beneficiary of his conquest of death, but he's going to enable us, if we remain faithful to him and united to him in his love and mercy and grace, he's going to enable us one day to triumph over death and to share in the same kind of life he has, the resurrected life of the world to come.
Does that get at what you were looking for, Bob?
Yeah. What was death like then before Christ? I mean, how do people died before Christ? Did they still go to heaven? Did they go to hell? Where'd they go?
Oh, interesting. So in the Old Testament and in the Jewish understanding of the afterlife during Jesus' time, there was a kind of condition or state, sometimes described, obviously figuratively, as a place, but spiritual souls are in a place only in the sense that they are where they at. So people who have died were waiting in a condition or a state of waiting to be able to. Those who are righteous were waiting to be able to enter fully into the presence of God. Sometimes we see this in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. Sometimes in the first century understanding of the afterlife, there's a reference to what's called Abraham's bosom. In the parable of the rich man and Lazarus is a poor man who his poverty didn't keep him from God, and he was faithful to God, and the rich man was not faithful to God. The rich man goes to suffer damnation, fires of damnation. The poor man Lazarus goes to Abraham's bosom. He's comforted in the presence of Abraham, the great patriarch of the Israelite people. And there is this separation between those who are in right relationship with God, on the one hand, who are awaiting the coming of the Messiah and Jesus' conquest over death, and ultimately awaiting the resurrection at the end of time, and those who have rejected the covenant with God, rejected a relationship with God, and are suffering judgment, the judgment of damnation. They too are waiting, but the resurrection, or the death of Jesus on the cross, the resurrection that is to come, the conquest over death, doesn't apply to them because they have rejected it. So this is the parable that Jesus tells, parable of rich man and Lazarus, that gives us a insight into how the Jewish people at that time understood death. But in the Christian age, after Jesus' death and resurrection and ascension, those who were in that state of waiting have been taken up into God. So they enter into the fullness of life. And there's, I guess you could think of that as another way in which we understand Jesus' conquest over death, because that condition of waiting that we refer to with respect to the righteous dead of the Old Testament period, that condition of waiting is analogous to death. It's a death-like state, even though it's described by Jesus in the parable as Abraham's bosom as a place of consolation. It is a place of consolation, but it's a place of waiting and imperfection in life. So the perfection of life for the righteous in the Old Testament is to be achieved through the resurrection of Jesus at the end of the age.
Okay, Bob, great question from you. Great answer by Mark Brumley. And we have quite a ways to go here in the second hour of our Thursday Open Forum on Catholic Answers Live. Jerry Escher, I'm in for Cy Kellett today, and Greg and Simon and Brad and the others, you are coming straight ahead. So wait just a couple of minutes. We'll get you on the air.
Call us now with your question. Hello? On Catholic Answers Live.
Have you subscribed to the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter? This is Catholic Answers Live host Cy Kellett, and I want to tell you about our new weekly newsletter full of behind-the-scenes information and facts you need to know about the show. It's easy to sign up. Just visit CatholicAnswersLive.com and look for the newsletter sign-up box on the front of the page. It's a great way to keep up to date with what's happening with the show and see what's coming in the days ahead, delivered weekly into your inbox. Sign up today for the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter and see what you've been missing. Go to CatholicAnswersLive.com.
A generation ago, Christian parents didn't have to worry about how to explain transgenderism to their 9-year-old or help their teenager deal with mockery at school for believing in traditional marriage. But today, as our culture's moral center continues to fly apart, and with every form of deviance publicly aired and celebrated, we have no choice but to equip our kids to understand about such issues. In Made This Way, How to Prepare Kids to Face Today's Tough Moral Issues, Layla Miller and Trent Horn give parents the crucial tools and techniques to form children with the understanding they need, appropriate to their age and maturity level, to meet the world's challenges. Silence can no longer be an option. If we're not teaching our children how to understand tough moral issues, then the world will. Read Made This Way and learn how to give your kids a firm foundation on which to build a life of moral clarity and happiness. Order your copy of Made This Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000 or logging on to the shop at Catholic.com.
Hi, this is Dr. David Anders. If you just don't understand something about the Catholic faith, Call to Communion is the show for you. Join us Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
And we're on coast to coast and around the world, and good to have you listening, watching, and many of you, of course, perhaps listening to the podcast a little bit after the live broadcast or in the archive. So good to have you with us on Catholic Answers Live. Next question coming from Brad in Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio Network. Hi, Brad.
Hey, good evening, Mark. Thank you for taking my call.
Well, thank you for calling.
So my question, I want to make sure I phrase this correctly. I grew up Methodist, converted to become Catholic by way of marriage. My whole family has probably gone back Methodist 2-3 generations. So I just feel that no one really ever knew any different than just being Methodist. So since I've become Catholic and I have more and more and more of a desire for my family members to convert to Catholicism, I'm curious because I'm looking for all opportunities. So I know that it's difficult for me to convert people, but if I'm praying to saints, specifically possibly family members who, a saint means they're just in heaven. So maybe if my grandparents or great-grandparents have made it to heaven being Methodist, do people in heaven that weren't Catholic or in the Catholic Church, do you think that they might have, looking back on it, like missed opportunities or a desire that they would have wanted to have been Catholic, or maybe a shared interest in bringing their children into the Catholic faith by way of conversion? I don't know if I'm phrasing all that correctly, but does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we're speculating, of course, but I would imagine that if non-Catholics, when a non-Catholic gets to heaven, of course, we understand that to mean that someone who, is a non-Catholic who died in a state of grace, who is outside visible full communion with the Catholic Church, but nevertheless is united with the Church by virtue of a union with Jesus Christ, obviously, that then that person can be saved if through no fault of their own they're not in visible communion with the Church. So they get to heaven, or they go through purgatory, they get to heaven, whatever they do. Are they going to have any kind of special concern about their non-Catholic descendants? Well, probably. I would imagine that they would pray for them, and that we could, ask ask their intercession to help with the conversion of family members. I mean, I often wonder. I'm a convert too. I was a Methodist as a young man, among other things, and I often wonder whether or not my coming in the Catholic Church was an answer to the prayers of some one of my ancestors, either during this life, praying that, say, her descendants would become Catholic or enter into full communion with the Catholic Church, or even in the next life. I don't know. I speculate. But we do know that there is communion, the communion of saints, the communion of those who are in heaven united with Jesus, are also united with those of us on earth who are united with Jesus in the order of grace. So we can pray for each other, and those who are in heaven are interested. They're concerned about us. In fact, they're more concerned about us out of charity than anybody in this life could be concerned, because they're in the presence of God. They're experiencing communion with God, and they know, at least indirectly, what is like not to be in that presence, and so they would have concern and love for those who are family members to be brought into communion with God. Does that make sense, Brad?
It does. And then one quick follow-up. Do you think there's any, like when you're in heaven, you're in heaven. So do you think there's ever remorse of maybe that you didn't, that you weren't Catholic? Do you think people look back and say, man, that would have been, looking now that I know the whole thing, receiving Jesus is, I've always heard, something that people in heaven don't do like we do here. We receive Jesus through the Eucharist. So do you think there's ever any remorse that they didn't become Catholic?
I would say heaven itself is incompatible with that remorse, but certainly purgatory would be a place where people can reflect back on how they've responded to the graces that they've received in ways in which their response was inadequate. And I could certainly see that, people saying, yeah, that time I was reading the Bible and I wondered about that passage and I thought that sounded very Catholic, but I didn't want to think about that, and surely the Catholics must be wrong, as I see now through the illumination of God, that was the Holy Spirit nudging me, and I didn't respond to him in the right way at that moment. I can see someone in purgatory experiencing an awareness that was an inappropriate response, and in that sense being remorseful.
Okay, Brad, thank you for joining us, for listening, and calling into the program today on Catholic Answers Live. Appreciate that very much, and we will welcome somebody else on that available telephone line, 888-318-7884, if you want to spell that out, 888-31-TRUTH, and we're going to go next to Greg, who is in Merced, California, watching on YouTube Live. Hello, Greg. Are you with us, Greg?
Yes, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Sure.
My question is, I'm a cradle Catholic, so I grew up Catholic church, not really going to church, but by my mother telling me, hey, time to go to church. I've been away from it for a long time, and I was asked the question not too long ago, why Catholic? What is Catholic? And I didn't know how to answer it, so I started looking for it, and I found you guys, which has helped a lot. But that, I guess that and then, the person who asked me this was somebody really close to me, so I respect her very much. She's a Seventh-day Adventist. She knows the Bible inside and out. She can give me verses. So I just wanted to know, that question she asked me, what is Catholic? Why Catholic?
So when you say what is Catholic, you mean what's the significance of someone identifying with the Catholic Church as opposed to some other church or no church?
I guess that would be the best way to phrase the question. Is why? What is it? What is Catholic? And yeah.
Well, I mean, I can answer in two ways. One is a general way, just to say what is true about being a Catholic that's pertinent to somebody who's looking for the truth. What is good about being a Catholic that's pertinent to someone who wants the good. And that's very general. But the second way one might reply has to do with the particular things that person has experienced. So why would anybody become a Catholic, or why should anyone become a Catholic? And then the second question is, why should I, or why did I, or why am I a Catholic? I'm going to just speak from my own perspective. It seems to me that there is a God who made everything and who has a plan for human life that's bound up with human beings knowing God, being in relationship with Him, sharing in His goodness, sharing in His love, and that the way in which God expressed His love for us, and the way by which God would like us to come to know Him is through Jesus Christ, the revelation of His Son. And Jesus wants to bring every human being on the planet into communion with the Father through Him. So He sent the Holy Spirit to unite us with Him, and by our being one with and being united with Jesus, we come to be children of the Father by virtue of Jesus being the Son of the Father. Okay, that is something I believe. Now the question is, well, what is the nature of that group of people or that community of people that Jesus seeks to bring to the Father and to bring into right relationship with the Father? And the answer to that, from my perspective, is the Catholic Church. The word Catholic there means universal. The universal community. The word church means those who are called. So those who are called from all of the human race to belong to that universal community. Why would I want to be a Catholic? Why Catholic? Because this community of people is the community that Christ brought into being and continues to sustain, to share fully in His life, and by sharing fully in His life, coming to the fullness of life in God. So that's what I'd say. I'd say, God, I want to do what God wants. God wants me to know Him, love Him, serve Him, be happy with Him forever. and he has given me his Son as the way by which I do that. And his Son has sent the Holy Spirit, and in sending the Holy Spirit has brought a community of people together, united with Jesus. I want to be part of that community. I want everything that Jesus has given to that community, everything that Jesus has taught, all the gifts, including the sacraments that Jesus has given to that community of his followers, all of the leadership and all of the direction and all of the common life together that Jesus has given that community. And those things in their fullest expression, the most properly ordered expression of those things, is found only in the Catholic Church. So why wouldn't I want that? That's what I'd say.
How does that sound, Greg?
It sounds great. I guess I needed to where I can find all this that points to that truth. And like I said, you guys have been great help, and you guys are filling it all in so much. And just today with you guys, just now it gave me a better, lined it out a lot better than
Right.
what I had understood it.
Well, I'd say there are a lot of resources. Catholic Answers, lots of video resources, a lot of print materials and resources to explain this fullness of Jesus's life and how it is present in the Catholic Church. Not saying that Christ is not present with other Christians in any way, that he's not there at all or anything like that. We're just saying that fullness of the truth, the fullness of the gifts of grace, the fullness of leadership and pastoral life is found in the Catholic Church. So God wills everybody to come into that fullness. So Catholic Answers can help you with understanding what that fullness means and can help those that you're speaking with.
All right, thanks, Greg, for the call. Have a blessed afternoon there in Merced, California, and we'll take more of your questions from Mark Brumley momentarily. But have you signed up yet? Have you joined the hundreds who have already signed up for the 20 Answers Challenge? Here's what Catholic Answers is inviting you to do, exhorting you to do, you might say, challenging you to do. This Lent and Easter, Lent begins, by the way, March 6th. It's coming right up 3 weeks from yesterday. And the 20 Answers Challenge here's what it is. When you purchase the sampler of all 32 books in the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, you're going to get a discount of 60% off the normal price. That's already fantastic enough. And if you live in the continental United States, you will get free shipping on that order as well. And if you're curious to know, what are the 20 Answers booklets, just go to the Catholic Answers website and do a search for that, because I'm on there right now. And some of the books in the series cover things like, as basic as God and salvation and the papacy and also the sacraments and the Bible. And they talk about tradition. And then they get into things like faith and science, death and judgment, Mormonism. I think there's one on Jehovah's Witnesses, end of life issues, and our Blessed Mother and abortion. All of the things that you really need to be well versed in. And what better time than to ponder these truths of our Catholic faith than during Lent and the Easter season. So Catholic Answers is inviting you to join all those who have already taken up this challenge, gotten a hold of these resources, and they can't wait for Lent to begin on March 6th. So just Catholic Answers asking you to work your way through all 32 books in that series during the Lenten and Easter seasons this year. So it's the 32 books in the 20 Answers Challenge series, 60% off the normal price and free shipping in the continental United States. Couple of ways to order. Customer service department, I think, is still open for a little bit longer here at 888-291-8000. That's 888-291-8000. You can always go. The store's always open online at Catholic.com. Okay, more of your questions for Mark Brumley, or just straight ahead. Stay with us.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Now there's a fast and easy way to get in touch with EWTN. The EWTN Everything number. Call 1-800-447-EWTN to get the latest information on programming, special events, pilgrimages, and more. Our EWTN Family Viewer Services representatives are ready to help you with whatever your needs may be. The EWTN Everything number. 1-800-447-EWTN. EWTN.
St. Paul's street evangelization isn't like other evangelism you might have seen on the streets. We don't yell, and we don't force anyone to pay attention to us. Instead, St. Paul's Street Evangelization is committed to presenting a positive, passionately Catholic presence to a world hungry for truth. For more information, or to start a chapter of your own, go to www.streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com. It's time to do our part.
Great to have you with us here on Catholic Answers Live in the home stretch of this Thursday Open Forum. Going to talk next with Simon, who is in Duluth, Minnesota. Hi, Simon. You're on with Mark Brumley.
Hi there. This is Simon. I was calling to ask about the recognition of martyrs as saints. I'm thinking, like, specifically, you had the 20, Coptic workers who were, and along with the Ghanaian worker who were murdered in Libya by ISIS. And then you have all those priests and nuns who were murdered by the Guatemalan regime of Frias Mott. And also, obviously, you now have the canonization of Father Romero. And I was just wondering, what is the process for recognizing a martyr as a saint?
Well, it's an examination of whether or not the
Did we lose Mark? We may have lost Mark Brumley, but we'll try and reestablish that connection. Simon in Duluth, hold on for just a minute there. We also have Ryan in Washington State and Teresa in Floresville, Pennsylvania, Aaron in St. Jacob, Illinois, Richard, another listener and viewer on Facebook Live in the state of Washington. And we are working on that technical. Mark may have forgotten to pay his phone bill. What do you think?
I am here.
There he
Can
is.
you hear me?
Yeah, we lost you for a minute there, Mark. But
I was giving the most brilliant answer anybody's ever given on the radio. And
I'll bet it was. Well, you need to either pay your phone bill or put another quarter in the slot there. I'll
do my best.
Go ahead.
So I can't repeat what I said before. It was so beautiful, but I'll do my best. In the case of someone who dies and would be a martyr, we have to ascertain whether or not that person died for the faith or was killed because of the person's faith. It's not just a matter the person was killed, but was the person killed because of his Catholic identity or his Catholic faith or his profession of faith, so on. When that is done, then the Pope can proclaim that person a martyr and that person is a saint. Does that answer? I don't even know if the caller's still there since I was gone.
Yeah, I think Simon's probably still there.
Yes.
I'm still there.
Yeah.
I was just, I guess it's just I've been reading up about canonization, and I was reading up about the stuff that the recent martyrs for the church have gone through and all of that, and it was making me wonder what the whole process was. That's all.
And as with the saints more generally, I mean, there's an examination of the person's life to see if this person lived a holy life and actually was a believer and all of that sort of thing. And then the question is, did this person die for the faith? I believe the Pope, normally in the beatification process or the canonization process, beatification pertains to whether or not the person is blessed in the presence of God in heaven. Canonization has to do with whether that person is recognized as a saint throughout the church. In that process, the person's life is examined, and then the person's intercession is sought. Miracles are worked through the intercession of that particular person, and therefore the church examines these things, and if the church finds a miracle. Am I still there, guys?
You are. You were breaking up just a little bit there, but hang in there, Mark. We got about 6 minutes left.
So if the church
you can do it.
Finds miracles that occur through the intercession of a particular person, then that's taken as indication. But in the case of a martyr, I believe the Pope, can and may waive the requirement for a miracle because of the witness of the person's death for Christ in martyrdom.
Okay, Simon, thanks for your call and your question. We appreciate that. Try and get to a couple more here, Mark, but just wanted to, I'm sure you probably heard the story of, I think her name is Jamie Schmidt, the woman in St. Louis who was...
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there's talk that she may be made a martyr here, one of the first, I think the first American-born woman martyr. And, you know, it's interesting, I had not heard about this until just, I don't know, a few weeks ago. And for those who haven't, do an internet search, Jamie Schmidt, and I don't know, put in first American-born woman martyr or something. She was in a Catholic book and gift shop, and a man came in.
Catholic Supply.
Yeah, Catholic Supply, and a man came in and wanted to take liberties with the three women who were there, and I guess he did with a couple of them, but Jamie basically looked him in the eye and said, "In the name of God, I will not take my clothes off," and she was killed at point-blank range, so that could very well be a martyrdom. Let's pray for that, because that would be quite a gift for the church.
Yeah,
okay.
Really, I'm being from St. Louis, it impacted me, and then Catholic Supply, I mean, for many years I went to Catholic Supply. This was the Catholic Supply up north that I didn't typically go to, but for many years I would go to Catholic Supply and buy books there that helped bring me into the Catholic Church. So this point of contact, I felt I had a communion with this woman, obviously because we shared the Catholic faith, but also, her connection with Catholic Supply there in St. Louis.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to go to Ryan, who is in Washington State, watching on YouTube Live. Hi, Ryan. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me right here. Thought there's a problem on the phone.
Nope. Try and be brief if you can, Ryan. We're getting short on time here. Go ahead.
Absolutely, yes. My question involves a hypothetical scenario. Now, it does seem a little far-fetched, but it goes something like this. If we as a human race were to make contact down the road with an alien species that was a highly advanced civilization,
yes,
and they started relating to us, and they were moving to our planet, and vice versa, and there were people who started marrying these so-called alien species or having relations with them, and the human race began to disappear because there were more of these human-alien hybrids popping up around the planet. I know it sounds absurd, but what would a Catholic stance be at that point in time? And would it be an ethical, and what would we take on an ethical stance?
Obviously, it's highly speculative. The Church hasn't, defined anything in this regard, except we might draw some we might speculate on the basis of whether or not a member of this alien species could actually procreate with a human being, through a natural process of intercourse. I would say that if that were possible, if God made it possible through a natural act of intercourse between a man and a woman, one or the other of the species, then you would have good grounds for saying that that could be a moral act, and that kind of quotes interbreeding would be ethically acceptable. Biologically, I find it difficult. I'm not a biologist, but what I understand of biology, I find it difficult to believe that could ever happen. But granted the premise that it could happen, that a man and a woman, each from one from a human race and one from the alien race, if they could come together and engage in a natural act of intercourse and conceive a child, then I think if that's possible, then I think it would be, you could make the argument that it would be ethical for them to marry and ethical for them to engage in procreative acts together.
Okay, Ryan, then we're going to have to leave it at that. And Teresa and Aaron and Richard, apologies to you. The clock always does this to us on Catholic Answers Live, but every Tuesday and Thursday is an open forum, so you are most welcome to try again on one of our future broadcasts. And Mark, you want to just mention that book real quickly again that you were talking about at the start of the show?
It's Sohrab Ahmari's book, From Fire by Water, subtitled My Journey to the Catholic Church. It's a wonderful, remarkable story about a relatively young man, a journalist, up-and-coming journalist, in the secular world. I encourage everybody to get a copy of it and read it and be inspired by his wonderful story.
All right, very good. You can find that at Ignatius.com. Mark, thank you as always for your fine work on the program. Good working with you again. We'll get caught up off the air one of these days real soon, God willing. I am Jerry Usher in for Cy Kellett today, reminding you that you can catch me and my co-host Debbie Georgiani on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on most of these EWTN affiliates, Monday through Friday at noon Eastern, and a replay at midnight Eastern time if you didn't catch the live show. And you can always get the archives at Take2Show.com. It's been great being in for Cy Kellett a few times this week. I'll be back with you again one more time tomorrow. In the meantime, I hope and pray that you have a blessed evening, and we'll talk to you next time here on Catholic Answers Live. God bless.